There was a time when buying a home was the central dream of ordinary people. Get a job, save money, build equity, pass it to your kids. That was the path. That was security. But something has fundamentally shifted. Home prices have decoupled from wages so violently that in most cities, a median home costs 8, 9, sometimes 12 times the median annual income. It's mathematically impossible for most people now. And it's not an accident. It's not the result of simple market forces. It's the result of a coordinated war on ownership, fought by corporations, investment funds and governments who have made a strategic decision that ordinary people should not own the assets they live on. They should rent. Forever. In 1965, about 65% of Americans owned their homes. That number remained stable for decades. It was the concrete expression of the American promise, the idea that if you worked hard, you could accumulate assets, you could build something. But then, slowly at first, and then all at once, ownership became a luxury. Today, in many major cities, that ownership rate has dropped below 50%. In places like San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York, it's far lower. Millennials own homes at rates 8% lower than their parents did at the same age. Gen Z doesn't even expect to own. They've accepted renters as their permanent status. This isn't because young people are lazier or more frivolous. It's because the system has been deliberately restructured to make ownership impossible and renting permanent. The average down payment for a home now exceeds the average savings of a household. Mortgage payments consume 40, 50, sometimes 60% of household income in major cities. A generation ago, that was considered a warning sign. Now it's normal. The banks say you can afford it because the computer says so. And millions of people, trapped between the desire for shelter and the mathematics of survival, accept the trap. Meanwhile, as ordinary people are priced out, institutional investors are scooping up inventory. They're moving faster than individuals ever could. They have access to capital. They have teams of analysts. They have legal structures designed to hide ownership and avoid taxes. And they have zero emotional attachment to the buildings they're buying. They see shelter as you might see a piece of machinery. It has a yield. It has a holding period. It has an exit strategy. The home where a family raised children for 50 years is just another asset class to be optimized. The mechanism is partly regulation. Zoning laws in most American cities make it illegal to build the kinds of homes that ordinary people could afford. Single-family zoning dominates, which means you cannot build duplexes, triplexes, or apartment buildings in most neighborhoods. This artificial scarcity drives prices up. Supply is strangled. Demand is unlimited. Prices rise forever. And the people who benefit are homeowners with existing wealth and the investment funds that buy up the limited inventory. Cities claim zoning protects neighborhoods, preserves character, maintains community. But what it really does is lock out the poor. It's a mechanism of exclusion disguised as preservation. And when a young person asks why they can't afford to live in the city where they work, the answer is because regulations make it illegal to build enough homes for everyone. The scarcity is engineered. Cities could change this tomorrow. They could legalize duplexes. They could allow mixed income development. They could choose density over exclusivity, but they don't. Why? Because the current homeowners who vote, who donate to campaigns, who sit on city councils, benefit from scarcity. And existing homeowners would rather exclude newcomers than welcome them. It's democracy captured by incumbency. Then, on top of that engineered scarcity, you have investment firms. BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, and thousands of smaller investment funds have systematized home buying. They don't buy homes to live in them, they buy them to rent them back to you. In the last 10 years, investment firms have purchased over 2 million single-family homes in the United States. They've turned housing from a place to live into a financial asset, a yield-generating machine. A home that once was occupied by an owner is now occupied by a renter paying a landlord that is, in many cases, not even a human being but a corporation. Rent provides returns. Returns attract capital. Capital buys more homes. The cycle accelerates. And as it does, the possibility of ownership for ordinary people shrinks. It's a feedback loop. Scarcity raises prices. High prices price out individual buyers. Investment firms buy instead. More inventory becomes investor-owned. Less remains for owner-occupants. Scarcity deepens. Prices rise again. The loop tightens. The playbook is ancient. The Romans understood it. Land ownership was power. The more land you controlled, the more people worked for you, the more taxes flowed to you. The Roman elite accumulated land until most of the population became tenants, working someone else's property, paying someone else's tribute. Over centuries, this consolidated wealth into fewer and fewer hands. Those who owned could accumulate more. Those who rented could never escape. And gradually, the middle class of small landowners vanished. They became peasants. When medieval feudalism spread across Europe, it was the evolution of this logic. The elite owned the land. Everyone else served. Rents flowed upward. Power concentrated. And escape became impossible because you had nowhere else to go. Every inch of productive land was owned by someone. You could only rent. Feudal lords didn't need democracy. They didn't need revolution. They had patience. They had land. And as long as they controlled shelter, as long as peasants had no alternative, the system perpetuated itself. Children were born into tenancy. They died in tenancy. Their grandchildren did the same. 500 years of the same relationship, replicated across a continent. Fast forward 1,000 years and the architecture is the same. The names have changed. The mechanism has been refined with financial engineering and data analytics, but the principle is identical. The wealthy accumulate land. The poor rent from them. Wealth concentrates. Power follows. And the middle class, the people who had small ownership stakes, are systematically squeezed out. What makes this particularly brutal in the 21st century is the scale and velocity. In the feudal era, consolidation took generations. Now it takes years. Algorithms identify neighborhoods. Corporate capital flows in, rents rise, local owners sell, investors buy. Within 5 years, a neighborhood that was owner-occupied becomes investor-owned. Local wealth drains to distant shareholders. The community that built the neighborhood loses ownership of it. And the people who live there, who worked there, who built community there, now pay tribute to a corporation in another city. This is happening in almost every major city in America simultaneously. The pattern is so obvious that it barely needs concealment. Institutional investors publicly state their strategy. They're not hiding it. They're explaining it to shareholders. Buy single-family homes, rent them out, extract returns, repeat until market saturation. The press releases are cheerful. The impact on communities is devastating. But here's where it gets truly insidious. The wealth extraction doesn't just stop at rent. Once corporations own enough homes, they control the market. They influence zoning boards. They shape housing policy. They ensure that new construction remains expensive. They lobby against regulations that would threaten their returns. They own the politicians who make the rules. A landlord with 50 homes becomes politically relevant. A landlord with 5,000 homes becomes a kingmaker. And the rules they write ensure that ownership remains impossible for everyone except those with enormous capital. Someone without $200,000 in savings is not buying a home in any major American city. That's not scarcity. That's design. The system has been engineered to transfer housing wealth from the millions to the few. And unlike debt, where at least you're building equity, renting transfers wealth with no reciprocal accumulation. You pay for 30 years and own nothing. Meanwhile, the landlord, whether human or corporate, collects your payments, builds equity, and passes an appreciating asset to their heirs. This is intergenerational wealth transfer in reverse. The poor pay the rent that builds the wealth of the rich. And each generation of renters starts from zero, while each generation of owners starts with a head start. The mathematics are brutal. A household renting at $2,000 monthly transfers $24,000 annually to a landlord. Over a 40-year career, that's nearly $1 million. And the renter ends with nothing. Zip. Meanwhile, the landlord, compounding those returns, watching property values rise, ends with millions. The renter's $1 million became the landlord's equity. That's not just capitalism, that's transfer. So what does this mean? It means that home ownership, once the mechanism through which ordinary people could accumulate wealth, has been converted into a mechanism of wealth extraction. It means that the fundamental promise of capitalism, that hard work and savings lead to asset accumulation, is now a lie for most people. It means that a generation is being deliberately kept in a state of permanent economic insecurity. They cannot own, they cannot build equity, they cannot pass assets to their children. They can only pay rent and hope it doesn't increase faster than their wages, which it always does. And as housing becomes unaffordable, as ownership becomes impossible, people are forced to accept an entirely new relationship to shelter. Shelter is no longer something you own. It's a service you consume, a subscription. And subscriptions can be raised, revoked, or cancelled at the discretion of the corporation that owns them. If you don't like the rent hike, you can leave. But there's nowhere to go. Every city is in the same situation. Every landlord follows the same playbook. The only escape is to leave the city entirely and move somewhere less desirable, less connected to opportunity. And that, of course, is also part of the design. It fractures communities. It keeps people moving. It prevents the accumulation of local power or wealth. The war on ownership isn't just about profit. It's about control. It's about ensuring that the majority remains dependent and mobile and unable to accumulate the resources necessary to challenge the system that controls them. This gave you a new perspective. Hit subscribe.